What if, at the quantum edge of consciousness, simply holding an open, non-interfering attention collapses probabilities in your favor, not by force, but by choice? Picture attention as a gentle observer at the precipice of possibility. Where most people try to shove outcomes into existence, this idea asks what changes when you stop pushing, and instead wait with quiet curiosity. It sounds strange at first because we're taught that effort equals results, but the thought experiment is deliberately provocative, not to sell mystical certainty, but to invite you to notice how your relationship to desire might be shaping its outcomes. This video promises a clear, practical reframing of manifestation and affirmations, so you can test the do-nothing approach without getting lost in woo fog. You won't find magical incantations here. You'll find simple language, short exercises, and tiny experiments you can try in real life to see whether less interference changes what shows up. The aim is accountability. Simple tools you can practice and measure, plus explanations that make psychological and attentional sense rather than relying on vague metaphors alone. We'll begin by separating useful ideas from popular myths so you don't mistake metaphor for physics, then move through a stepwise narrated practice that takes you from inner stillness to observable shifts in daily life. Each section builds on the last, clearing the field, preparing your internal landscape, trying a short do-nothing ritual, and then learning how to read feedback without turning it into drama. By the end, you'll have a compact routine, and more importantly, a way to test whether doing less actually opens room for a different kind of outcome. Please subscribe, like, and comment for your support. Number 1. Clearing the field, myth versus mechanics. People reach for quantum language because it's a tidy way to talk about something strange and counterintuitive, tiny causes creating big shifts. But the moment we drop technical precision, the metaphor mutates into magic talk, and that's where confusion lives. Use quantum ideas only as a careful analogy. Attention acts like a spotlight on a field of possibilities, and where you point it changes which options become visible. The important caveat is this isn't a literal physics trick. It's a way to describe how choice, focus, and uncertainty interact in our experience. What actually moves the needle are ordinary psychological and attentional processes dressed up in fancier wording. Beliefs and expectations shape what you notice, selective perception, which shapes decisions, which reshape habits and then circumstances. The loop is simple but powerful. When you quiet the noise, your nervous system stops defaulting to fight or flight, your mind becomes less reactive, and small aligned actions start to compound. In short, change happens through attention, interpretation, and iterative behavior, not through chanting equations. With that map in hand, metaphor cleared, and mechanisms visible, you're ready to face the central paradox. When should you act and when should you yield? That question is the hinge of the whole approach. The next section will show how to tell the difference between useful doing and counterproductive pushing, so your stillness becomes an active tool rather than passive avoidance. Number 2. The paradox. Action versus allowing. Doing and allowing are two distinct operating modes that most of us swing between without much awareness. Doing is the pushy, linear part of you that plans, schedules, and tries to make outcomes happen through effort and strategy. Allowing is the receptive side that observes, accepts, and creates space for things to arrive. It's not passive resignation, but an open stance that welcomes possibility. Both modes are useful. Doing gets the practical work done. Allowing gives your efforts room to breathe and steer toward better options. The problem shows up when we confuse them or apply the wrong one at the wrong time. Trying harder can actually make things worse because effort and tension narrow perception and tighten outcome expectations. When you push from a place of urgency or fear, your nervous system goes into hypervigilance, which fuels tunnel vision, rash decisions, and confirmation of the very limits you're trying to escape. Forced outcomes also create resistance in relationships and circumstances. People and systems react to pressure, so the harder you strain, the more friction you introduce. In contrast, stillness reduces arousal, widens attention, and lets subtle cues and novel solutions appear that frantic pushing would have missed. Before you attempt the do-nothing experiment, it's crucial to prepare your inner field so stillness functions as a skill rather than passive avoidance. That means calming habitual reactivity, sorting out the loud stories that demand immediate fixes, and practicing a tiny structure for receptivity so you don't mistake inertia for allowance. Once the field is clearer, you can move between doing and allowing with intention, taking small, aligned actions when they matter, and leaning into open observation when outcomes are best served by space. Next, we'll align that internal landscape so your stillness actually supports change. Number 3, preparing the field, alignment before surrender. Start by taking a gentle inventory. Notice the loudest inner stories that run on autopilot. I'm not enough. I have to hustle, or if I don't force it, it won't happen. And trace the tiny habits that keep those stories alive. These micro-habits are boring but powerful. Compulsive checking, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, over-planning, or immediately leaping to action at the first twinge of discomfort. Naming the stories and the habits that feed them turns vague unease into concrete targets you can work with, and it gives you a clearer sense of what to soften rather than simply suppress. Once you've mapped the terrain, use short, repeatable recalibration techniques to calm the nervous system and steady attention. Try a 60-second breath check, slow inhales, longer exhales. Sprinkle intentional micro-pauses into your day. Pause before replying, pause before deciding, and run quick truth checks on thoughts. Is this thought factual, useful, or a recycled fear? These practices aren't mystical. They reset your physiology and reduce reactivity so your observer can actually observe instead of getting swept up in drama. Do them regularly for a few days, and you'll notice your baseline attention widen and your impulses soften. With those small resets in place, you'll have a quieter, more receptive inner field. Not empty, but organized and less reactive. That's the condition where the do-nothing experiment can actually be held. Stillness won't feel like apathy because you've done the preparatory work to distinguish helpful calm from avoidance. Next, we'll introduce the core do-nothing practice and show precisely how to sit in it so that your non-interference becomes a deliberate, skillful stance rather than passivity. Number 4, the core do-nothing practice, how to actually sit with it. Begin by finding a comfortable seat and setting a 5 to 10 minute window where distractions are minimized. Start with an arrival, 2 slow, grounding breaths, and a soft scan of your body to settle tension. Bring a gentle, non-demanding attention to the thing you care about. Name it briefly in one sentence, then let that naming go. The core of the practice is release into observation, watching sensations, images, and small impulses as they rise and fall without trying to fix or narrate them. If your mind wants to solve or plan, note that impulse and return to the simple stance of curiosity. Think of the whole practice as a quiet experiment in letting outcomes breathe. Important, doing nothing is not avoidance, laziness, or emotional numbing. It's a deliberate, skillful non-interference that requires presence. You're actively choosing to stop pushing so you can see what moves of their own accord emerge. That means you stay engaged enough to notice opportunities or internal signals that feel aligned, and you remain ready to take small, wise actions when they present themselves. The discipline is in the return. When stories, fear, or the urge to control pull you away, you kindly bring yourself back to observation rather than beating yourself up for not doing enough. Holding this simple ritual is the start. The next step is learning to watch with more finesse. Once you can sit in receptive attention without turning it into avoidance, you'll want to sharpen how you notice, distinguishing useful nudges from reactive noise, and learning which inner movements deserve a responsive action. In the next section, we'll train those observational muscles so your do-nothing stance becomes an informed, responsive way of being rather than a passive experiment. Number 5, watching without interference, the observer skill. Treat yourself like a curious scientist of your inner life. Record what rises, when, and how it shows up. When a feeling, image, or synchronicity appears, label it briefly: tightness in chest, bright idea, coincidence with old friend, then note it without spinning a story around it. The aim is simple data gathering, not dramatization. A short journal line or a quiet mental note will do. Over time, those small observations build a reliable map of what your attention consistently attracts. Next, learn to separate genuine signals from background noise. Signals tend to feel steady, slightly calm, and often point toward actions that align with your values. Noise is loud, frantic, and usually tied to fear or scarcity scripts. Test impulses with tiny experiments, a 2-minute action that gathers more information without high stakes. If a prompt repeats, feels coherent with your goals, and returns useful feedback, treat it as a signal. If it's sporadic, panic-driven, or accompanied by tightness and must-do-now urgency, treat it as noise to be observed and released. With your observational muscles strengthened, you'll be better positioned to loosen your grip on outcomes, which is the next crucial step. Sharper watching makes surrender less like blind hope and more like informed trust. You can let go because you've actually been paying attention, not because you're giving up. In the next section, we'll practice specific release techniques so that non-attachment becomes a skill you can call on anytime, not just a hopeful idea. Number 6, releasing attachment. Surrender as a practice. Use short, simple language to practice release, phrases, and tiny rituals that signal openness rather than demand. Examples: say to yourself, "I am open to this unfolding," or "I release the how," and breathe out on each phrase so the body registers the intention. Micro-rituals help anchor the verbal cue. Write a worry on a scrap of paper and fold it away. Rinse your hands under water while imagining tension flowing off, or ring a small bell to mark a moment of letting go. These small gestures create a felt permission in your nervous system that words alone rarely accomplish. Doubt and backsliding are normal parts of the process, not proof that you've failed. When the old control habit returns, use a gentle reset. Label what you're feeling. There's fear. Take 3 slow breaths and return to a micro-ritual or a short journal line that reconnects you to your intention. Treat relapse like data, a sign of where your conditioning is still strong, and respond with curiosity rather than self-criticism. The quicker and kinder your return, the faster the habit of surrender builds legitimacy in your daily life. Once release becomes a practice stance, your affirmation should shift from forcing outcomes to inviting possibilities. Swap "I will get rich" for softer, present-tense invitations like "I am open to riches" or "I welcome what wants to come." These forms keep intention alive while preserving non-attachment. They orient you toward possibility without tightening the grip on how it must appear. With that language in place, the next section will show how to craft affirmations that support receptivity and action in harmony. Number 7, rewriting affirmations for non-doing. Shift your affirmations from commanding to inviting, language that pulls rather than pushes. Instead of rigid statements like "I must have wealth" or "I will make this happen," try softer present-tense invitations. "I am open to wealth," "I allow wealth to unfold," or "I welcome what wants to come." That small grammatical pivot matters because it changes the felt tone of the phrase. Commands tighten the body and trigger resistance, while invitations ease the nervous system and create a receptive field where possibilities can surface. Try swapping a single sentence in your usual affirmation practice and notice how the energy behind it shifts. Layer in micro-affirmations as short, easily repeatable anchors you can use throughout the day. These are one-line, present-tense phrases aimed at presence and receptivity. Examples: "I am watching," "I am open," "I let go," or "I notice without needing to fix." Use them while you breathe, before you open your laptop, or when an old fear pops up. Their power is cumulative because they repeatedly reorient attention back to observation. Keep them brief. Feel the words in your body for a heartbeat, then move on. These are not mantras for trance, but tiny corrective cues for your attention. Words are useful, but embodiment gives them traction, so pair your new invitations with small, aligned actions that honor stillness. A micro-affirmation plus a 2-breath pause, a soft unclenching of the jaw, or a single tiny step toward a goal, an email sent, a 5-minute experiment, signals to your nervous system that invitation and action can coexist. That link between language and movement is the bridge to the next section: how to choose low-force, high-sensitivity actions that respect your non-doing stance while letting life respond and rearrange. Number 8, aligned microaction, movement that respects stillness. Think of aligned microaction as tiny, low-force experiments that honor intuition without imposing an outcome. Instead of launching a full project or making a high-stakes decision, choose one small, measurable step you can take in 5 to 20 minutes. Send one clarifying message, schedule a short call, post a tentative idea, or try a 2-minute prototype. Frame each step as a hypothesis. If I do this, I'll learn to accept myself and treat the result as data, not a verdict. That removes drama and keeps the momentum gentle. Timing and sensitivity are learned skills you develop by watching yourself closely. Use the observer skill to notice the quality of the impulse. Does it come with a soft clarity and a sense of ease, or with tight urgency and must-do-now heat? Test with micro-actions. If an impulse feels calm, try a one-step experiment. If it feels frantic, pause, note it, and return to observation. Pay attention to external feedback too. Responses that arrive smoothly or doors that open slightly are good indicators you were aligned. Repeated friction suggests another approach or more inner work is needed. As these tiny moves accumulate, you'll start to see measurable shifts, small ripples that add up to real change, and that's where tracking becomes useful. Keep a simple log of your experiments, the felt quality before acting, and the outcomes, internal shifts, new contacts, unexpected opportunities. Over weeks, this record turns pattern into proof. You'll distinguish what reliably works for you, which micro-actions to repeat, and where surrender still needs practice. Next, we'll look at how to read those signals clearly so you can iterate with confidence. Number 9, tracking change, feedback loops that matter. To make this practice meaningful, you need to recognize the difference between real change and wishful interpretation. Genuine shifts tend to show up in concrete ways, a sense of inner ease where tension once lived, unexpected opportunities or connections, clearer decisions, or small but meaningful coincidences that point you toward useful action. Record these signs simply and consistently. A daily note, a short journal entry, or a quick checklist of what changed internally and externally. The goal isn't to prove something mystical. It's to observe patterns that reflect actual movement in your perception, behavior, and environment. As you gather feedback, treat your practice like gentle experimentation rather than rigid discipline. Notice what works and refine accordingly. Adjust your affirmations if they feel forced, change your quieting techniques if your mind remains restless, or experiment with different kinds of micro-actions to see which produce smoother results. This flexible approach keeps the process alive and responsive, allowing you to learn from both progress and setbacks. Over time, small adjustments help align your inner state and outer actions more naturally, making change feel less like effort and more like flow. With consistent tracking, patterns begin to emerge. What consistently brings clarity? What triggers resistance, and where your attention shapes results most strongly. These insights move the practice beyond a temporary experiment and into something more sustainable, a way of engaging with life that blends awareness, release, and intentional action. In the final section, we'll explore how to integrate these lessons into a daily rhythm so that stillness and responsiveness become part of how you live, not just something you try. Number 10. Integration and next steps, making stillness your new baseline. To make stillness a living practice rather than a passing experiment, give it a simple daily structure. Begin with a quick morning anchor, a minute of quiet breathing, or a gentle affirmation that sets your intention to observe and allow. At midday, pause briefly to check your inner state. Notice tension, release what you're gripping, and return to presence. In the evening, reflect on what shifted throughout the day, where you allowed, where you pushed, and what you learned from both. These small rituals keep your inner field clear and gradually establish awareness as your natural baseline. Growth also becomes easier when you balance independence with connection. Sometimes you'll benefit from allies who share similar intentions, people who can reflect your blind spots, encourage your practice, and remind you to stay grounded. At other times, retreat and solitude are necessary, giving you space to listen inward without outside pressure. Through both connection and quiet, kindness toward yourself remains essential. Compassion softens resistance, shortens recovery from mistakes, and creates the emotional safety needed for genuine transformation. In the end, the central paradox remains simple yet profound. Doing nothing is not the absence of action, but an active choice to stop interfering with the natural unfolding of change. By observing, releasing, and responding with care, you create space for outcomes that force alone could never achieve. As a gentle next step, try one 5-minute do-nothing experiment today. Sit quietly, observe without control, and notice what arises within you and around you. Let that small experience be your beginning, and watch how even the quietest shift can reshape the way you move through life.